Human design reveals who you are energetically and who you came here to be. I'm Dana, human design specialist.
And I'm Haley, the human design newbie. Listen in as we explore how leaning into your authentic self is your ultimate path to success. Welcome to the Human Design High podcast. Let's get into it.
Hello. How's everybody doing today? I am still running a solo show, just temporarily, while Haley prepares for the wedding, which we are now 2 weeks out from the big day, which we're all very excited about, getting a little nervous about, but looking forward to a really awesome wedding. And what else is happening? Let's see. You may know that I live in South Carolina, and it has been all over the news the last week. Hurricane Ian, which made landfall here on Friday, just about really close to where Haley's wedding venue is, but everything is okay there. It was Category 1, which is still a serious storm, and but we were very lucky here at our house. We just had some minor tree limbs down and ended up actually gathering a lot of firewood, because my husband likes to go out after the storms with his chainsaw. Manifesting generator, can't sit still, likes to go out with his chainsaw after the storm and see if there's any trees down that he will then cut up and bring home and use his log splitter to have firewood throughout the year. And so we did that yesterday, which was a lot of fun. Did something a little different for me, which was usually my husband is in charge of the outside the house maintenance and improvements. I tend to the inside of the house. But it was a big job yesterday, so I helped clean up the front yard, and then we helped my son Ian, and I helped my husband Richard really just reduce a huge trailer full of wood down to stackable firewood. So anyways, I don't know how relevant that is to you. That's just what's been happening in our neck of the woods. And ironically, this hurricane season, they name the storms every year of what's going to be coming. And this was Hurricane Ian. When I saw the names, they released them several months before. When I first saw the names, I saw that there was an Ian and there was a Richard. And to me, that's an indication that it's a good chance that we might see a Hurricane Ian or Hurricane Richard, because I live with both of them. So my son is Ian, husband is Richard. And but no, they're not. My husband's a little bit like a hurricane at times. Being that he's a manifesting generator, Sacral 3420, straight to the throat. So he is quite often the fast moving storm in our house, of just kind of blowing in and leaving a little bit to clean up in his wake, so to speak. So no offense to the rest of you manifesting generators out there. It's just a little thing. Ian, my son, is a emotional generator like me. And so things move a little different for him. He's a little slower. But that actually kind of brings me to today's topic, because I wanted to talk about sacral beings. That would be generators, manifesting generators, but mainly the generator type and decision making. Because one of the questions I get a lot is about knowing how to follow the sacral response, especially if you're an emotional generator such as I am. And I've also had people reach out on TikTok asking me that question. Okay, great. I know what a sacral response is, I think, but how do I use it, or how does it inform me? And so I thought I would kind of go through that today, because one, like I said, I'm a generator, so I have the sacral response, but I'm also an emotional generator, so I have to do that clarity over time. And then I also have a defined spleen, which throws more into the mix. So I have a little bit of everything. So I thought that is where we would start for today. And also of note, we know that Haley is a projector, so she does not have a sacral response. And God bless her. And she tends to zone out when we're not talking about things that are relevant to her. And I know that she records this podcast with me, but she doesn't always listen to it. So she may never hear that. So I'm safe in saying that. But you know how much I love her. Anyways, so a quick reminder, primer, whatever you want to call it, about sacral energy and generators. So you are a generator type if your sacral center on your body graph is defined, and that is the second square up from the bottom. The bottom is the root, and then you have the sacral center. If you have that center colored in, that makes you a generator type. So for a generator, the sacral response is this gut level body response to outside stimuli, let's say. That means that if something in your outer surroundings shows up, and it presents you with an option or something to follow or something that you might be interested in, you will get a sensation in your body that gives you kind of this yes or no response. Now, we're all born with it if we're defined in the sacral, and that means that we were doing this as babies, as children, we just didn't know it. And it's quite possible that as you were growing up, especially, I would say, I don't know, I might even venture to say that probably if you were a female person growing up, you were definitely told more to use your words when someone asked you a question. We were all raised to be proper little girls, basically, boys and girls, but I think boys get a little bit more of leeway when it comes to grunting. But that was essentially what the sacral response would be. If you were to ask a very small child, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? If they have sacral authority, you will get a clear or. And if you have small children or have ever been around small children, you're probably very familiar with that. And it's, the sacrally defined people make up about 75% of the population. So there is a lot of this present in our population. However, as I said, we have been taught, conditioned, however you want to look at it, to use our words instead. And that tends to override the sacral response, because the sacral response is nonverbal. It doesn't come from the mind. It comes from deep in the body, in the sacral center. And it gives this nonverbal, it doesn't go to the mind, it's nonverbal response. So you can see how over time, especially when we moved as humans from this splenic reactionary awareness for survival awareness, moving to the ajna, the mental awareness, where, in the 1700s and the scientific revolution and all this thing started coming forward, where we started to use reason and logic more, we were also taught more to use deductive thinking, logical thinking, reasoning in our decision-making process. And this also interferes with the large part of the population having this body response to decision-making or questioning or stimuli. And so we tended to override that. And it's really important as we move to the next phase of our evolution, to the solar plexus center being our dominant awareness, which is our emotional awareness. It's becoming more and more important for us to get back in touch with this sacral center knowingness, this response. And I say this for generator types. Let's be very clear there, because if you are a non-sacral type, which means projectors, reflectors, or manifestors, you're going to have a different way of making decisions. But today I just really wanted to focus on the generator types. And even if you are not a generator type, this can be very helpful, because you are most likely in relationship with people who are generator types, whether that's your spouse, your child, your parents, your boss, your neighbor, anyone. You may not know everybody's actual type, especially just random people. But if you start experimenting with how you ask them questions, you might be able to give a little hack there. And that is, when you're talking to people, if you ask them open-ended questions, it's sometimes harder for sacral people to answer the open-ended questions, okay? As in, what do you want to do today? That can be a difficult question for a generator type. However, if you start narrowing it down, do you want to do something today outside the, do you want to go out today? They might say yes, but then you would have to possibly ask them, well, what do you want to do? If you said that, they would be like, well, I don't, they could be, I don't know. This is a situation I have a lot. I'm not really sure sometimes. But if somebody starts giving me yes or no options very clear, it can help me narrow it down as to what I really want to do, because my body will respond to it. And these simple yes or no questions are the surest and quickest way for you to start getting back in touch with that sacral response. And like I said, this can be very helpful for you parents out there, especially because you know your children's birth date and time. You can figure out, if you go on my website, I have a body graph generator on there now where you can look up anybody's body graph if you have their birth information. But for your children especially, this is helpful for you because it can help you communicate a little bit better with your child, and it is also going to help them trust their sacral response if they are a generator type. And I think before I went off on that tangent, I was talking about how this is becoming more important because we are moving away from this more logical, reasoning, mind-centered awareness to a more emotional, intentional, creative interaction with the world around us, the quantum, into creating what it is we want and living the lives that we want to live. And if you are a generator type, this is absolutely integral to that process, because this is really going to help you decide where to focus the considerable energy that you have in the sacral center. Remember, the generator types, we are the true builders, the workers in the world, because we do have this defined sacral energy that is sustainable. And that means that a lot can be asked of us. We can generate a lot of energy and can get a lot done in a day. And we can exhaust ourselves in that work and then have access to that energy again the next day and the next day. That's the general idea when a generator type is following their sacral appropriately and entering into work that they actually want to be doing. And because so many generators have gotten away from being in touch with that sacral response, it's quite possible that a lot of us, myself included, have engaged in work that we don't really want to be doing, but we just figure, well, we can do that. It wouldn't take too much from me to do this. What other choices do I have? This is what is expected of me. They asked me and I know I can do it. Can I really say no? Like, all these things are probably familiar to you if you're a generator type. You have felt that before. And if you look back over your life, you may not have been aware of your sacral response. I certainly wasn't until a couple of years ago when I discovered this information. And really in the last 2 years when I've really been trying to follow it and pay attention to it more. But if you can look back at your life and look at the decisions that you made, the bigger ones that, or even smaller ones, doesn't have to be that big, but you can look at when things just really seemed to flow, or you felt like you had maybe a certain amount of luck, or the coincidences were just lining up for you when things were really kind of falling in line for you. And then the times when you may have had regrets, or there are times where you realize that maybe you took on too much or maybe you were burning out, if you just kind of ponder that for a little bit and you have a sacral response, you could kind of see where it was working and you were following it, but you weren't aware of it. So let me give you a couple of examples if this helps. So when I look back over my life and think of the times where I really felt the magic of things working out my way, I'm realizing that this was me following this sacral response to the next thing and to the next thing and to the next thing. Now, as I said, I am an emotional generator. So that means some of the bigger things I had to follow that response, but it also had to stay consistent. So what does that look like? So what that means is that I get a sacral response, something outside of myself in my outer awareness, my outer reality, whether it is something I see online or something somebody asks me, or I hear a song, or I see somebody, I recognize any of these weird things that are outside of me. If I have a response to it, yes or no response, that's what I need to pay attention to. When you have that thing outside of yourself that you respond to, your sacral says yes or no. As an emotional generator, I still have to wait a little bit. I have this recognition that yes, this is appropriate for me. This is for, these bigger decisions. But I also have to kind of sleep on it, wait a little bit and see if it's still appropriate for me, if I still feel that way. So if someone was a sacral generator without emotional authority, they can always trust that yes or no in the moment for them. But for emotional generators, we have to still wait a little bit to gain clarity. Okay, so as I said, I would but I would show you a real life example of this. So one of the things that always comes top of mind is how I met my husband. And I met him very, very young. I was 19. He was 23, but I was already living on my own. I had moved down here to Myrtle Beach from where I grew up back in Columbus, Ohio. And I had been here about a year. And we actually met in a bar. But here's kind of how it unfolded, in the sense that I was already in a somewhat relationship with someone else. When I say somewhat, because I guess I would consider him my boyfriend, but he didn't live here in town with me. He was in the military. So he would come to town every, couple weekends or whatever. So really, I considered myself single. And just not surprisingly, because as individual as I am, I always felt myself kind of to be single and independent. And this guy was very nice. He was very handsome. He was a great boyfriend, in the sense that he was a very attentive person. However, I had started to get the feeling that, this guy probably is not for me. And I remember one weekend in particular, he came to visit, and I just had the feeling since he got there that it was just like, maybe now is not the time, or he's not the person, because honestly, I wasn't looking for boyfriend material, husband material. Honestly, this guy just kind of stumbled into my life anyhow, which is kind of how it was up until I met my husband. And so I had started to get that feeling that it wasn't right. And it may have been a week or a couple visits before that too. I started to get that feeling, but I just kind of didn't know how to let him know that this ain't working out, because I didn't really have any reason why it wasn't working out. It's just me. And I was young. I was 19, so I didn't know how to handle these things. So one night in particular, we went out to a place that my roommate and I would go to a lot. It was a bar down the road. Well, actually quite far down the road. It was about 20 minutes away. And to go see live bands, which is what we like to do. And I remember I was sitting there watching this band that was definitely not kind of music my quote unquote a boyfriend would have been interested in, and he clearly wasn't. He was so out of place, but I was into it. It was my thing, and it was just over and over and over and over and over in my head, like, oh my God, this isn't right. I got to get out of this. What am I going to do? I don't, blah, blah, blah. And as I had all these thoughts, I happened to look up and I saw behind us across the room, I saw this other guy standing there who I can only say was the most electric feeling in my body ever. I saw that guy and I was like, holy crap, that's who I came down here to meet. Now, a couple things happening here is that I also have splenic, not authority, but definition. So you could also say that was my spleen that was like, yep, there. My sacral was like, oh, yeah, I see that. I recognize that because I had been thinking, this isn't for me. This isn't right. I saw that person and I said, oh, yes. And, but I also had emotional authority and I was really on a date with my boyfriend. So I did nothing about it, but it stuck with me. And on the way home, I now had the clarity that this wasn't for me. And I broke up with my boyfriend on the way home, which I'm sure he wasn't happy about because he was staying with me, but he ended up having to leave and go back to where he lived. And so that's not the end of the story. The rest of the story for that one is, no, I did not meet my husband in that night. Of course, I did not know that was him. But over the next several weeks, as I would go to the same club, bar, whatever you want to call it, that we would go to there every weekend because there wasn't much to do around here, I would see that same guy. I would see him and I would still get that same feeling in my body, in my gut. That was just like, yes, every time I would see him, it just was this literal, visceral feeling. And it never changed. I never had a like, oh, well, that was interesting for a little bit, but not, not for me. It was probably a month. My husband likes to say I stalked him because he wasn't aware of me. Of these weeks, because I am an observer type. I am also a Scorpio. I just sat in the background and I just watched and I observed. And anyways, so eventually I did meet my husband and it was the very right choice for me because, well, here we are. We're 30 years later. We're still together. And it took that instinctual moment, that clarity to make sure that I was entering into the relationship appropriately. And I did, but I didn't know I was doing that. I was just also very scared to meet him because he did cause such a reaction in me. But, spleen knows, sacral knows, solar plexus had to wait to make sure it was on board too. And the rest is history. That is one of my favorite examples. I could just as easily give you examples of when I've rushed into either some type of relationship or an arrangement, financial arrangement, when I did not honor my sacral. Again, I didn't know that at the time, but I know it now to recognize it. Things that didn't work out as well, purchases you made. I used to have the shiny object syndrome. I would get the sacral response right away, like, ooh, I want that. Ooh, I want that. And when I had the money, I would quite often buy it. And quite often would later on, even a year later, be like, why did I buy it? I don't need this anymore. Why did I do that? What a waste of money. I've done that so many times, I can't even begin to tell you. I've gotten rid of a lot of things I didn't need. I have bought lots of programs that I maybe shouldn't have. These are just all these things that my sacral responded to. But if I got a little more clarity over time, I might have realized, well, I probably didn't necessarily need that. And then also I have taken jobs that didn't work out, that honestly I entered into them not because of how I felt, but because of logically it made sense. I should be there doing that because I can, and it's not too hard, and I should be doing something. And what else am I going to do? I have definitely done that. I mean, honestly, I am working part-time still in a job that I'm having a hard time getting out of because I'm committed to it and I feel obligated, but at the same time, it's not something I love. It's never really lit me up. It's made me feel useful, but that's not really, following your passion or your dreams is to feel useful. It's a big part of my design is feeling useful, but there's never been this feeling in this job of, oh, yes, I really want to do this. It was more a feeling of, okay, well, I'm not doing anything else. I guess I can do this. And so I'm still hanging on. And it's not terrible, but I also I'm done with it. But I'm a line 4, and line 4s tend to also like to have their next thing lined up before they leave their last thing. So many layers to your design that can lead you in certain directions. But so that's just an example of how sacral authority works. You will get something, you usually, actually, let me back that up. You will have an idea in your mind of something you are interested in, or something that you would like to do, or somewhere you would like to go. And then you hold that idea. You don't have to hold on to it like, I've got to force it. You just have this kind of what Abraham Hicks is, kind of pulling it into your vortex. This is something I'm interested in, or pondering, or considering. And then you just have to really pay attention to the world or outside of yourself and see what shows up to you and see how you respond to that, right? So I hope that is clear on that part. And then for the emotional authority, you have that same process, but then you don't right away make a decision. You have to sleep on it, or say, and this is talking about things that are a little bit more involved, like taking a job or spending, a little more money than you're comfortable normally spending, or entering into a relationship, or moving, or whatever it is. These things you kind of have to take a little more time to consider and check back in with your sacral response and see if it's still a yes for you 24 hours later or 4 or 5 days later, depending on how much time you have to make a decision. Which, in the online space, it's very easy for sacral people to get manipulated into those quick decisions. I should say emotional authority people, sacral people, to get manipulated into those fast decisions that you then regret. And that goes for all emotional authorities. I shouldn't just say for sacrals, but I'm always focused on myself, my own experience. So sorry about that. Emotional authority, you should always be taking that time. Those countdown timers, I hate countdown timers. And I know they're supposed to be an effective thing for making fast decisions, the fast action bonus. Oh my gosh, I've been burned so many times on a fast action bonus. And I say burned, I don't, mean like it was totally bad, but it was something I probably didn't need because I felt rushed to make that decision. And that's just not appropriate for me. And it may not be appropriate for you either. And so how the spleen plays in there, because I've heard people asking about, well, what if I have a defined spleen and defined sacral and this? Well, I have all three. All I could say is that the sacral and the spleen work very much in tandem together. And the spleen acts fast and it's in the moment to give you that direction. And if it's a smaller decision, like I would say about what you want to eat or which, direction you want to go on your walk, your spleen can help lead you that way. Go this way, go that way. That's, very simple. But if you have emotional authority tied with your sacral authority, you definitely need to wait to make those bigger decisions. Now, should also mention that a negative response is just as much information as a positive response. So if you are presented with something that you are ambivalent with, or it's a hard no, if it's a hard no, don't even worry about it. Just trust your body. Like for me, I get literally a pulling in feeling of like, my Haley, I think, has mentioned it on here before that she sees it in my face when it's a definite no for me. And if it's a definite no for you, you are sacral, you need to really start paying attention to those things and not feeling obligated to override that in order to make someone else happy, or reasoning your way into, well, I could do this. And it's challenging, especially for women. This is very challenging to have this feeling in your body of no, but then your mind trying to override that no. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. And this is the biggest challenge to generators, is to honor those no's and don't feel that we have to explain ourselves. That's the hardest part too. Don't explain yourself if it's a no. Just say, no, that's not for me. Now, the ambivalent response also is kind of like, well, maybe I could. I don't know. If it's a maybe, it's probably something you also need to consider that it's not for you. Because in my experience, it's really the yeses that need to be paid attention to for that clarity over time, to make sure it's always a yes, if that makes sense. If it's a no, don't worry about it. If it's a maybe, give it time, go through that process. But quite often, those maybes even are no's, because that sacral response is to give you that lit up, that yes feeling, for you to know that yes, this is something I want. And that something that you want that lights you up is going to lead you to the next thing that's going to give you that yes, I want that, and the next thing and the next thing. And that is essentially what generators are here to do. We say it all the time. You're here to respond to life, and that's what it means. That literal follow your bliss quote, that is a generator's path. I mean, honestly, I think it's all of our paths, but generators, because we carry this considerable sacral energy to really build families and businesses and build worlds, we need to follow that yes that lights us up, because that's going to be the best use of our sacral energy, how we're designed to use our sacral energy. Because even though we all have sacral energy, we're all going to use it differently, because we all have different designs, we all have different gifts and talents, and each and every one of us has a very specific place to be using that energy. And that sacral response is there to continually lead you in the right direction. And it can be scary and it can be challenging, and I'm still working on it, because once you have this knowledge, to put it into action and trust the universe that you are being led to where you need to go, it's a process. It's challenging because we don't know where we're going. We don't know where it's going to lead us. And that, especially for someone such as myself, is terrifying. I always want to know what's going to happen. I try to, my ajna and my open head are constantly trying to figure out what to do next, because what could happen. But I have slowly been trying to bring myself away from that awareness and into the body awareness, because my mind can just continually torture me, but my body is here to really let me know what's appropriate. And I'm willing to give it a try. And I'm going to ask you if you're willing to give it a try as a sacral being, as a generator type. Are you willing to start following those yeses and give up that control of knowing what's going to happen? Are you? It's something to think about. So I may have rambled a little bit today. I'm going to trust that what I said needed to be heard, and that there was something of value there for some of you out there, hopefully all of you that are listening. So thank you for being here today. If you have any more questions about sacral authority or your strategy, anything that as a generator, you can always shoot me an email, dana@humandesignhive.com. There's also a little jot form thing in the show notes where you can submit a question there. If you have a question, I can answer it on the podcast, because a lot of times your question might be helpful to a lot of people out there, because we tend to have a lot of the same questions. And don't forget, if you are curious about other people's designs in your life or your own design, again, I have my on my website now, you on humandesignhive.com, you can find your own copy of your body graph. You can run lots of charts there. And if you would like for me to walk you through your design, I also have some options on the website as well where we can work together. So make sure you check that out. So I'm going to sign off for today, and I hope y'all have a wonderful week, and I will be talking to you soon. Bye. You made it all the way to the end of today's episode, so you must have liked what you heard. If you did, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode, and perhaps leave us a good review. And if you know someone who wants to dig into all things human design with us, make sure you share the Human Design Hive podcast with them. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.